Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely.
So it's this English learning podcast called Daily Money Briefing.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
It's actually pretty cool. You get the
Yeah.
financial news and kind of a language lesson all in one.
Oh, I like that. Sort of killing two birds with one stone.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got this stack of sources in front of us, and our mission really is to dive into the key takeaways from the latest global economic news.
That's right.
We're looking at fresh U.S. inflation figures, a pretty significant development in U.S.-China trade, and also this interesting stimulus idea coming out of South Korea.
Yeah, some really different pieces here.
Definitely feels like there are some important signals, maybe even some, well, surprising links to explore.
Exactly. Let's sort of unpack them and see what they tell us, both on their own and maybe how they connect.
All right, let's jump in. First up, U.S. inflation. You flagged the May CPI numbers.
Well, what's interesting is year-over-year inflation, it did tick up a tiny bit from 2.3% in April to 2.4% in May.
Okay.
But, and this is the key part, it actually came in below what the market expected. The consensus was looking for like 2.5%.
Huh. So a bit higher than last month, but still lower than predicted. What about that change just from April to May?
Even softer there. The monthly increase was just 0.1%. Again, analysts expected 0.2%. And if you look at the core CPI, taking out food and energy, that was also below forecasts, both month on month, which was really low at 0.1%, and year on year at 2.8%.
Wow. 0.1% monthly on core? Can you explain why that specific number is such a big deal? Because, 2.4% yearly still sounds like, well, inflation.
Right, but that very low monthly core number, that 0.1%, is really significant. It suggests those underlying, more persistent price pressures, they might actually be cooling off quite rapidly.
Yeah, really.
It's almost flat month over month. And that gives the central bank, the Fed, some actual data suggesting the main engine of inflation is slowing down faster than they might have thought.
Right, gives them confidence, maybe.
Exactly. More confidence that price stability could be returning without needing to keep rates super high for ages.
I see. So that weak monthly core is the real insight driving the narrative here. And what's the implication for the Fed and interest rates then?
Well, this data definitely feeds into the market view that we could see a Fed rate cut later this year, probably second half. It just gives the Fed more evidence, more justification if they want to make that move, even with other worries like, tariffs or the deficit hanging around.
Makes sense. Soft inflation gives them options. Okay, let's shift gears from domestic stuff to the, well, always complicated U.S.-China relationship.
Apparently, there's a framework agreement now. It's meant to actually implement that Geneva trade deal they negotiated last month.
Right, I remember the Geneva deal talk, so this is the how-to guide for that. What was the basic idea of Geneva again?
Broadly, Geneva was about trying to de-escalate some of the tech and trade friction, the stuff that's been bubbling up. This new framework is about the actual mechanics of doing that.
Got it. And what's the main trade-off in this implementation plan?
The core swap they've outlined is this. China agrees to ease up on its export controls for rare earth elements.
Which are vital for the U.S., right? Tech, defense.
Absolutely critical. And in return, the U.S. is going to scale back some restrictions on exporting semiconductors and related tech to China.
Okay, so a very specific quid pro quo there on really strategic stuff. Is it like an even trade? What's the insight?
Well, it really shows that complex interdependence, doesn't it? China's got leverage with rare earths, which the U.S. needs. The U.S. has leverage with chips, which China needs for its tech goals. So it looks like maybe a tactical pause, a recognition that despite the bigger rivalry, they both need something from each other right now.
Interesting perspective. A tactical truce. Now, separately, but sort of happening at the same time, there was this other piece of news, something unexpected.
Yeah, this one's a bit of a curveball, separate from the trade mechanics. President Trump announced the U.S. will start issuing student visas to Chinese nationals again.
Wow, really? To study in the U.S.?
Yep, allowing them back into U.S. colleges. It's being framed as a kind of goodwill gesture amidst all the other tensions. Quite surprising, particularly the source and timing of that announcement.
Definitely adds another layer. Okay, moving from those high-level global dynamics, let's talk about stimulating economies on the ground. South Korea's plan sounds different.
It is. They're putting together another supplementary budget, and part of it looks like consumer support payments. But the way they're doing it is quite novel, probably regional vouchers, and they'll have expiration dates.
Regional vouchers that expire. Why that specific approach? What are they trying to achieve?
Two main things, it seems. First, the expiration date forces people to spend it quickly. Get it into local businesses, not just save it.
Makes sense. Boost spending now.
Second, and this is maybe the more complex part, it tries to tackle worries that previous aid helped richer areas more. So the idea is to have different discount rates.
Different discount rates. How would that work?
Basically, if you live in a lower income region, your voucher might get you a bigger discount funded by subsidies. So you get more bang for your buck, steering the stimulus towards areas that need it more.
That's a very targeted way to try and address inequality and stimulate locally. Is the plan set in stone?
Not quite. There's still some debate going on internally in the presidential office, mainly about whether to give it to everyone universally or just focus it on, vulnerable groups.
Okay, so still being ironed out.
Yeah.
All right, let's quickly recap the insights we've pulled for you today. We had U.S. inflation coming in softer than expected, which kind of bolsters the case for Fed cuts later this year.
Right.
Then on U.S.-China trade, this new framework to make the Geneva deal happen, swapping rare earth access for semiconductor access. Plus that quite surprising student visa news.
Yep, the visa element too.
And finally, South Korea exploring this creative stimulus, expiring regional vouchers with potentially different values depending on the area.
Exactly. 3 distinct snapshots. Maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. How might these different moves, central bank signals from inflation data, specific trade deals between major powers, and these very localized stimulus efforts, how might they interact?
Could they influence each other in ways we don't immediately see, as the effects sort of ripple out across the global economy? Something to ponder. Thanks for diving deep with us today.